Hey everyone, how you doing? Welcome to the channel. February's gone, it's in the past, but let's go and have a look back at the month to see how my reading went. So as usual with my wrap-up videos, I'll go through a bunch of books that I planned to read, that I put on my TBR for the month, and then some additionals that I got to at the end of it as well. This month is also one that I didn't quite get to, for reasons I'll go through when I talk about the books. Before I do that though, the stats as usual, and there will be timestamps down below so you can skip these and go straight to the book talk if you're not interested in the stats at all. And for those, I read 6 books in February. There were no DNFs, there were no novellas in here as well, just 6 novels, and that gave me a page count for the month of 2,863, taking the year-to-date page count to 5,679. The average page count for February was 477, so that takes it up a little bit year to date to 465, and similarly with the average rating, which in February was 4.17, so the year to date rating now on average is 4.07. For the series stats, I've now started 5 series, so 4 in January, but only 1 new series started in February, so it's good to see that slowing down. Haven't finished any as yet, but I've got 1 series that I decided not to continue with. So this is where I read book 1 and decided that's enough for me. I'm not going to move on to book 2 in that series. I'm up to date with 17 series in my overall kind of list, and of those ongoing series, there are now 29 in total. For the days since the last 5-star read, haven't had one yet for this year, so it's now sitting at 72 days. So on to the book talk, and as I say, there is one that I planned to read in February but I actually didn't. I've counted this one as a did not start, a DNS rather than a DNF, because I realised quite quickly as I was reading it that this isn't one for me. It's one that I knew that might be the case, but I thought I would give a shot to anyway and see if it still worked out all right for me. But sadly, it was a little bit too much of a stretch for me and my reading tastes. This one though was The Hallows by H.L. Tinsley. It's a 1920s noir kind of style urban fantasy. So if you're looking for that sort of thing, I think from what I did read of it, it did a very good job at kind of portraying a fantasy aspect, a fantasy kind of setting, but akin to that 1920s kind of vibe. It really did feel like the old detective noir films set in that kind of era. You've got telephones, you've got guns, you've got cars that are all harking back to that kind of time period. You've also got the magical or the fantastical element as well, with these very strange, not quite human nuns. I won't go into them too much. And you've got these drugs as well, which give people essentially magical abilities, it sounds like. I didn't get into them too much. The only one that I did sort of really see before I decided that the book wasn't going to be for me was, I can't remember what they called them, but they each kind of had different names. You take this drug, and depending on kind of person you are and also how used to the drug you are, how often you've taken it, how much you've consumed in the past, it'll have different effects. And this one that I did see basically made him float. So the kind of tagline on the front of the book does talk about floating nuns, so that is obviously something that you can expect from this book. It was an interesting element, but overall the story, the setting, the type of book wasn't really for me. So I decided to not include that on my DNF stats because it wasn't a book for me. It's not one that I would normally pick up. I call it a DNS instead because I didn't really get deep enough into it to call it one that I'd started. The books that I did start though, and indeed finish, we started the month with a review copy of Alien Clay by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is one that I've had for quite a long time actually, but it comes out in March, so that's why I left it until February so I could read it basically the month before release and talk about it in a kind of timely fashion rather than several months before the fact. This was a very interesting one. I've read quite a bit of Adrian Tchaikovsky, including now quite a bit of his sci-fi, so I kind of know what to expect. I'm not going to talk about it too much because I do have a dedicated video review that you can find linked in the top corner there, but it was a very interesting world that you had here. a very, I said it was kind of a grimdark Earth that these characters were leaving, but this new planet that you have is a very vibrant, very colourful, kind of indicated by the cover there, planet, and there's loads of strange things on it, and it really helps because you've got literal world building. It really helps to display the inventiveness of Adrian Tchaikovsky's writing. There are just so many weird and wonderful things, and it helps take the story in different pathways, different directions to what you thought you might be getting from it. So a very enjoyable read. It's a standalone, I believe, but we have seen in the past Tchaikovsky has gone back to what was previously considered to be a standalone and expanded it into a series. So there's always that possibility. This one I did enjoy. It wasn't perfect for me. There were a few things that I wasn't quite so keen on, but overall it was a very enjoyable read, and I gave it 4 stars. Then I've got an audio book, which was a patron pick from my friend Arlena, so thank you very much. She nominated Unbound by Michael R. Miller. This is book 2 of Songs of Chaos, a big beefy tome, and it's good to have a big beefy tome like this if it's something you're enjoying, and that's definitely where I was with this one. It's a really enjoyable story. I was just thinking as I kind of picked all the books off my shelves to come and sit down and talk to you about them, that it felt like it was before February that I read this. It seems so long ago for the shortest month of the year that I read this one, but it's been a very busy month, I guess, so there is that. But yeah, I really enjoyed the story. I'm enjoying the development of the characters that we've got here. We're starting to see some new things with our 2 main characters who you have on the cover there, Holt and Ash. And I guess it really shows that there are some interesting storylines that you've got opening up, basically. I enjoyed the side characters as well. And what I also liked is in January I read Last Stand of the Stone Fist, which is a standalone-ish kind of novella, which is set before this. It features one of the characters from Ascendant, and in here we see kind of the tendrils of the story that you had there. We're introduced to events that were covered in the novella, so I think that was quite nice. It was a nice accompaniment that enhanced my enjoyment of this one. But a very enjoyable audiobook as well. I'm enjoying the narration of this series. Overall, it is going to be one of the highlights, I think, of my year. I've got the next book on my shelf ready to get to at some point as well, although it is another big beastie tome, so I'm not sure when I'm going to fit it in, but I'm looking forward to whenever that is. This one I gave 4.5 stars. It was really, really enjoyable, just not quite at that 5-star level for me. I did another audiobook after that, and this is part of my ongoing Adrian Tchaikovsky sci-fi buddy read. So we were on the Final Architecture book 2, which was Eyes of the Void. I thought the first book, the Shards of Earth, was just lacking in a couple of little places, just in terms of the kind of the progress of the story, I guess. We were introduced to new things at various points, and then there would be little flashback chapters that told us a little bit more about them, and I didn't like that. I didn't like the way that it broke up the storytelling for me as I was going along, but the audio narration really helped to tie it all together quite nicely. In here we had less of the looking back. It was more to do with looking forward, or kind of, I guess, the present as the story was being told, and I really appreciated that. It definitely felt like we were well into a series rather than having all of those little introductory elements brought into it. So it was definitely, for me, an improvement on Shards of Earth. I loved some of the elements of the storytelling that you got in here, but it's the characters that have really driven this series for me so far. I really like the literal, but the character voice that you have of some of the crew of the ship that a lot of the story takes place on. I like that we saw some new places as well as we're going through this story, and it introduced some new storylines, which obviously are left open. We need to see where they're going to go in Lords of Uncreation, book 3 in this series, which I'm going to be reading in March. But as far as book 2 goes, as I say, it was a definite improvement for me on book 1, and I'm hoping book 3 continues that nice trajectory when I get to it. This was another one that I gave 4.5 stars to, and yeah, it's a really enjoyable series so far. Now, when I was talking about Alien Clay, I did say about liking to read new release books, advanced review copies, kind of a month-ish before they come out for review purposes. But this next one, I think it's August that it comes out, but I was offered the chance to read this one a bit earlier to provide a blurb for the book, which is always a nice honour to have a publisher and an author nominate me, if you like, to do that. So that was really nice. But this one was The Last Shield by Cameron Johnston. It's being published, I'd say, in August, I think it is, by Angry Robot Books. And it's one that I was really looking forward to pretty much from the point where I first saw it, and it was described as a gender-bent fantasy Die Hard. I love the Die Hard movies, and it just sounded really, really interesting. I've seen very similar kind of themes in a couple of places. There's another Angry Robot book I read recently, I proofread actually, which was The Hunter's Gambit, which has got some similar themes, and also the movie, I think it's called The Princess, has got very similar themes as well, or an overall kind of theme. And that theme is a kick-ass female with a sword or whatever weapon of choice, battling her way through a castle, basically against numerous foes. That's kind of what we've got here, but it's I guess overall it's only a small part of the story, and that was probably my one, I guess, frustration with The Last Shield actually, because it just seemed to take a while to get going. You know from the synopsis what to expect from this story. She's going to be battling through the castle, corridor by corridor, hallway by hallway, pretty much against an enemy of superior numbers. But it took quite a while to get there. I was talking to my patrons in my weekly updates on this one as I was reading it a couple of times. I said that I feel I'm going to literally turn the page, or on the Kindle, but turn the page and the action's going to be starting up, and then something happens and then we go off and we're doing something else, because it did take a little while. There was a period of recovery after an injury, for instance, which took a good portion of the book early on. So I think it was about, it might have been just before, but it was around the 40% mark that things really started to kick off. And after that point, it didn't really slow down too much. So it kind of kept winding and winding and winding. And then all of a sudden the tension got too much and it snapped. And you've got everything kicking off and all this action happening. And I really liked that. I think it pulled together quite nicely with that kind of slower start, really steadily building, even though I personally would have liked it to start off a little bit earlier on in the story. When it did, I kind of forgot about that, and it was nice to have the character building anyway that you had in that earlier portion. But once the action did start, I really enjoyed it. It was really nice. It wasn't just kind of going through and battling. There were odd little things that our main character Briar would do, odd little parts of the castle that she would visit, odd little traps that she would set, odd little traps that she would foil that were set for her. And I just like the way that she kind of thought about it all, and it wasn't a case of just this invincible warrior going through and winning the day, basically. You know, she got really grievous injuries, various things like that happened to some of our characters, and I appreciated how that was integrated into the story. It made it, for what it is, a little bit more realistic, I guess. It was a very enjoyable story overall. I'm sure you'll hear a bit more about it as we get closer to release date, but this one for me, I gave 4 stars to. Then I've got another audiobook that I read, and this was just a random one. I was looking on my Discord server, and someone had been reading it, or actually it was one of my friend's wives had been reading it and really, really loved them, and I just thought, I need an audiobook, I'm going to go for it. So I picked up The Crown Tower by Michael J. Sullivan. This is book 1 of Rhaenyra Chronicles, and I've been saying many times that I started to read this one after loving Rhaenyra Revelations, and I just couldn't get into this one. Actually, when I picked it off the shelf, I realised there's a train ticket in here. It's on page 178, a train ticket from 2015. So that's when I was reading this one originally, and how far I got. A lot further than I thought. That's nearly halfway through this book. But I don't know whether it's just a case of it wasn't the right time for me, or maybe it wasn't the right medium, and I listened to this one, as I say, as an audiobook rather than flicking through the pages or reading it on my Kindle. But it was a different experience for me. It was definitely, I think, the right time for me to be reading it this time, so that obviously helped. But I really enjoyed it. It was a good narration as well, but I really enjoyed the story. There was obviously a portion of it where it wasn't new to me, because I remembered elements as I was listening to it from where I'd read it, and I kept thinking to myself, I'm going to get something new soon, but I was further in it than I thought I was, I guess. But when we did get something new especially, that's when it started to get really interesting for me. So maybe if I'd continued reading originally, it would have been okay. But yeah, I really enjoyed the story. I enjoyed some of my questions, I guess, being answered, because again, I was talking to my patrons saying, we're getting close to the end and we've got these unsettled little bits of I guess the character building between our two main characters, Royce and Hadrian, and I can't see a resolution. I can't see how they're going to be resolved by the end of the story. But you know, the author is pretty good at that. He'll whip together some action, and all of a sudden, things have been set in motion, and we're starting to get our answers. So I really appreciated the way that that was done here. Overall, it was a really enjoyable story. I'm very excited to continue now and to see where we go. I did give this one 4.5 stars, but a lot of that was because of the setup, which just took, again, a little bit of time for me, and there was that kind of initial aspect where I love the bromance, I love the characters here that you've got, Royce and Hadrian, and that wasn't really visible in here because they're just meeting for the first time and they don't like each other initially, so it takes a bit of time for them to, I guess, warm up to each other. So I did say in my Discord server that although this is 4.5 stars, I'm probably expecting 5-star reads now from the rest of the series based on that, so here's hoping. And then the last book, because I did have a little bit of time left in the month, I did manage to squeeze in Sister of the Dead by E.C. Greaves. This is book 2 of Vaishivka, following Daughter of the Beast. Now, I did say, if you've seen my March TBR, that I was adding this one in, but I may finish it and you might see it in my wrap-up. Well, here you go. I did manage to get a bit of reading in over the last couple of days and managed to finish it just about in February. I'm not sure with this one whether I left it a bit too long. I said it was, I think it was June that I read Daughter of the Beast. So, you know, 9 months later I'm coming to this one, and I don't know whether I just wasn't in the right kind of place with the story, basically. Maybe it's one of those ones that you would definitely get a better experience if you read them almost back to back. I am planning to read book 3 in April with a couple of friends, so you know, we'll see how that one goes. But this one I didn't enjoy as much as Daughter of the Beast. I guess there were a few elements in the first book that were kind of unique. There was that kind of novelty value, so maybe that played into it as well. But I think that with where the characters were in here and what they were doing, it just wasn't as exciting to me as what I got in book 1. So I'm hopeful for book 3. It's a bit of a thicker read as well. Maybe that means that there's a bit more development of story than I felt I got in here. I don't know, I'll have to wait and see on that one, but still enjoying the series. It's just that this one was not as good for me as the first book was. I gave it 3.5 stars because I guess maybe it was a little bit disappointing for me, but I also felt that it just wasn't gripping me. I think the storyline itself wasn't as interesting to me as the storyline that we had in book 1, but as I say, book 3 is coming up in a month or so, and I'm looking forward to getting to that one and wrapping up this series and hoping to finish it on a high. So that was my February reading. Another good month, I have to say. There might not have been a 5-star read. I do wonder actually if I'm aware of that. I know that it's been, 72 days since my last 5-star read. It was sometime in December. And maybe I'm kind of waiting for a book that really knocks my socks off this year to give that first 5-star to, and it kind of builds if I've not done that. I don't know. We'll see what I've got, but I've got some really good potential in March, and yeah, I'm obviously hoping with every book that I pick up that it's going to be a 5-star read, so we'll see how that goes. Let me know down below how your February reading went. What was the favourite book that you got to, and were there any surprises for you. I'll hopefully see you in the next video soon. Until then, of course, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.